Thank you all for having me, and thank you for that wonderful welcome. Thank you, Raquel, for this invitation. I was thrilled, and I'm so just excited that I'm able to share these toys and this project that I've been working on. Just so that you all know, I am not Zoom proficient, so the team will be here to help me out. If I make any mistakes, I probably will make a silly face and someone will have to come save me. But at any rate, I'll just make sure that at all times we're having a good time. So I'm going to now share my screen so that I can begin my my presentation. And I'm just going to start by saying just a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to talk about the toys, and then why Dare is so right on point for a Black Toy Story. A Black Toy Story got started in February of Black History Month. But before I get there, I just want to tell you a little bit about their background as toys. So here you see there were three in the beginning. There's Bessie Coleman, Benjamin Banneker, and Matthew Henson, right? These three great Black historical figures that all did amazing things. I've only gotten to see two of them, Matthew Henson and Benjamin Banneker, who were given as a gift. Now, this guy, attorney Sterling T. Ashby, is the toy creator. And I came to learn about these toys from him, and he kind of was looking for educators who would be looking to engage with his toys in the classroom. Now, that kind of sounds weird. Normally when you're in a classroom, you put away your toys, you just have your pencil, your paper, your books, it's reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's not playtime. And so he had a vision that I personally feel was extremely daring, because he's an attorney, very successful attorney, went to the Wharton School. He's got a JD, and it doesn't make any sense why someone so successful and so serious in their career would want to engage with toys. And more importantly, the kind of toys that he wanted to create were very, very unique. And so I'm just going to share with you guys a quick video that kind of illustrates.
Barbie and G.I. Joe may be classic toys, but a graduate of the Milton Hershey School is making sure African-American kids have different kinds of action figures, ones who are real role models. Dennis explains.
Because now I'm forcing not only maybe kids to learn, I'm actually forcing the parents to learn too, a little bit too.
Officially, Sterling Ashby does not teach at Milton Hershey School, but he's certainly educating their students.
Just talking to kids is not enough. We've got to find some ways to get their attention through great exercises, great games.
Or great toys like these, which Ashby invented. They are action figures like G.I. Joe, but they are not fictional. They were real people and important African Americans, like Benjamin Banneker, a surveyor who laid out Washington, D.C., Bessie Coleman, the first Black woman pilot in America, and Matthew Henson, the first American to reach the North Pole.
They might not be figures that they know about, but they might excite a younger kid to think about history and try to do something, try to build on that.
Ashby calls them history in action toys, and he feels he's tapping a market larger toy companies don't.
There's a need there. They've not met it fully. I mean, they have to do a run of 500,000 toys, right? They have to do a very, very large run. And in the process, maybe they're ignoring some smaller communities there.
Ashby is right at home in the Milton Hershey community. He was a senior class president here in 1987. He has an engineering degree from Lehigh and a law degree from Columbia, but he now makes African-American toys. More importantly, he makes an impression on students.
He became something, and he came from pretty much nowhere, just like us at the school.
Not yet a financial success, Ashby has risked everything to chase this entrepreneurial dream in the spirit of the man who has a town, a chocolate company, and a school named after him.
It's with me. I mean, I still wear the ring I left here with, and it's with me all the time. I mean, the combination of building.
So I just want to stop there because I wanted to, because I think you guys have a good understanding of who Sterling Ashby is now and what these toys are about. Now, when they were saying that he was taking a risk, again, he put everything that he had in his savings into building this business. Now, again, like we saw what these toys look like. Now, I don't know how many of you are really toy proficient now in this new millennium, because, you know, we're all adults now, but these toys didn't look like standard action figures. You know, these toys look like regular people, okay? Well, maybe not this guy, because he's got on a fur coat and, you know, he's ready for the Arctic. But this guy looks like a regular 17th century dude, you know, like in his 17th century for that matter. Like, what kid is going to want to play with someone from the 17th century, okay, that doesn't have a, you know, some large weapon and, or, you know, a dragon, maybe, I don't know. But at any rate, these weren't typical toys. And so that was daring in itself for him to attempt to create something that had never been done before. There have been Black dolls, there have been Black toy figures or action figures in the past, but there had never been action figures based off of real historical figures. Okay, that sounds real boring to most people. They're like, oh, a historical figure. Oh, we're talking about history. Oh, that's so boring. But that's the whole reason why he incorporated toys. And I honestly wasn't a believer until several years after I had the toys. And so here, you know, we see him in a photo and he would go to these I guess with open houses at schools, you know, when they would have opportunities for people to come in and share educational tools and what have you with the educators there at the local high schools or elementary schools. And I noticed that when I looked at video footage of him to do a little research further about the toys, because I met him personally, but I never became a personal friend of his, though I do know that there were a lot of people who were very close with him here in the district. He's originally from Philadelphia, but he really established himself here as a educational and social activist, and he volunteered at a lot of schools around the district. And so, you know, he had a vision that would change the way we approached education. And I think that's very daring. My background is in education. Well, the last, I'll say for 13 years, I won't say that's my foundation, but for 13 years, I did find myself in the classroom. And I spent most of that time at Duke Ellington School of the Arts. And the one thing that I will tell you that made all the difference in my engagement in class was to tell the students to play. And most of the time that would be, you know, kind of prodding. You'd think you wouldn't have to prod high schoolers to, you know, play, but they're too sophisticated by the time they're 14. And so I understood the necessity to continue to play because that's where discoveries are made. And, but then there's another thing that happens that has to do with identity. And that's really where these toys become special, because it's not simply about you playing, it's about you understanding life from a real perspective with real people who had real circumstances and real challenges and overcame them, not a fantasy figure or something magical that that somebody could maybe dismiss and say, well, you know, of course, He-Man can do it. You know, he's got the power of Grayskull. But, you know, what do you do with you're just your regular self? And so these toys kind of speak to that humanistic part of us that's way past the imagination, and it speaks to the determination of us as human beings. And so the other thing was that he wanted these toys to be nonviolent. Oftentimes when you have action figures, they are, you know, usually meant to be fighting. And he didn't want to give kids a view of historical Black figures that wouldn't be in line with humanitarianism and excellence and achievement. And so that's part of the reasons why he chose Benjamin Banneker and Bessie Coleman and Matthew Henson as the historical figures that he would start his toy line. Now, he had envisioned having several more historical figures that he would have memorialized as toys, but unfortunately, Sterling Ashby died of a rare form of brain cancer in 2017, in December of 2017. So unfortunately, he was unable to finish out his vision for the toys. But it's interesting because I came across these toys and I immediately was excited, and I, was looking for, ways that I could maybe help him promote the toys. And I definitely was excited, but I wasn't ready to play. I was excited about them as collector items. I was not excited about them as toys. I thought that they were too delicate. Like, as you'll see, I'll share some things about playing with the toys a little later on. But right now I want to discuss a little bit about Matthew Henson and why Matthew Henson was chosen as one of these daring characters that he would turn into a toy. And so Matthew Henson, most people know, well, I won't say most people, because there's still a lot of people who don't know that the first person to ever reach the geographic North Pole was a Black person, along with 4 Inuits who spent close to 20 years and 7 expeditions attempting to make this goal. And so that's very daring. They spent, more than 8 to 9 months in the Arctic, and sometimes they're literally waiting on an ice sheet to form so that they can cross to some other ice sheet or some other ice mass. There's so many variables that happen out in the Arctic tundra. And so here's some photos that kind of illustrate more of what life was like for him in the Arctic. Obviously, there's not a whole lot to see because there's lots of snow. So, the really great thing that I thought was interesting was that they had to sew their own garments. Obviously, anything that people would have bought at the Macy's or at, I don't know what kind of department store would have existed back then, would not have been satisfactory. But they learned from the Inuits how to make clothing from walrus skin, from polar bear fur, seal skins, and to insulate and keep themselves warm. But I personally think they look pretty fly. I think the design on that fur looks pretty dope. But that to me is just like you're daring to like look good in the snow on top of daring to make your own clothes to stay alive. So I think the whole exercise of just going to the Arctic is crazy. But just imagine, like, during that time when he was traveling to the Arctic, the United States was not a place for Black people to feel ambitious and motivated by their country. And so this was an opportunity for him to leave the day-to-day of feeling like other or being overlooked altogether in terms of his importance in the day-to-day. He was a very skilled individual, and this allowed him to have purpose and allow people to see past him as a Black man and to see him as simply a man, so that his time spent there was not in vain, in the sense that you're wandering around in the snow to some degree, for years, trying to hope that you get to a marker that is constantly moving. Because what people don't realize is at the North Pole, the ice sheets are constantly moving. And so that in itself, just thinking like, I really want to make this goal, and going with Perry, Robert Perry, who was actually the person who funded the trip. Going with Robert Perry, this guy was not a nice guy. Like he is considered a hard as nails kind of boss to have. He's very arrogant, and he's very thoughtless in the sense of like his team. Like he's more determined to the goal than anything else. And so to continue to go on expedition after expedition with this guy and to see it through, I felt was pretty amazing, that you attempted to do this with this guy, but then to decide, there's a moment where you have to decide, like, are you doing this for him or are you doing this for you? And at the time, there was a campaign to uplift the race with Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois. And there was this need to raise the profile of individuals who were doing great things. And he was motivated to keep doing these things because he wanted to be an example for the race. And so that to me takes a lot of courage to say, I'm going to be, I mean, I hate to say it, but I'm going to be the token. I'm going to be the one that's going to step out here and I'm going to test the waters and I'm going to set the example and I'm going to show excellence. And so 6 daring moments of Henson's life. First of all, this young man is orphaned as a child by his parents and then by an uncle who he comes to live with in DC. He's originally from Baltimore County, and but he ends up moving from his family's farm to DC to stay with relatives. It's a very chaotic household that I read about. There's not a lot of information that I can read. I'm sure if we keep doing this project a little bit longer, because Taraji P. Henson is actually the great niece of Matthew Henson. I'm pretty sure there's an opportunity to find more information, and I've been finding more and more about their connection to his descendants, that they know a lot more about the artifacts and things like that. But at 12, he left home and he walks to Baltimore Harbor to find work. Now, I think that in itself is just ridiculous. Like, you'd have to be pretty determined as a young person and pretty daring to decide you're going to walk and you're going to walk alone. But at the same time, he didn't really have a lot of options. And so life had kind of placed him in a position to have to find his way. He ends up finding a job on the Katie Hines merchant ship. And I'll tell you this much, like, there's not a lot of information about the Katie Hines. Most people historians have tried to find information on it, say there's no record. And so that's still up for debate, whether or not he actually sailed around the world, or maybe he just sailed in an oyster bay. So, so we're not sure about that one. There's nothing to verify that right now, except for the fact that he said he traveled the world. And I would like to believe that. And so with him traveling around the world, we can see that there's probably lots of challenges that he faced if in fact that happened. He did save Captain Robert Peary's life twice. Once when he fell into the Arctic, the freezing Arctic waters, and he had to pull him to safety. And then another time where he had to rescue him from being trampled by an oxen. So that was its own, trivial situation where they were looking for food, and the herd they fired some shots, and the herd went running. And while several of the animals went down with the bullets, there was one that didn't, and he was charging for Robert Peary. And Matthew Henson had the good sense to aim and fire his musket to kill the oxen to like 10 feet before he would have reached him. So he's quite a hero. And again, like I said, he was the first person to ever reach the North Pole. But literally, in his book, he talks about the moment where he decides that this is going to be something he takes for himself. Like, can you imagine going along with the ride? And, there's mistakes being made, there's casualties, lots of people died. More than 20 people died with them trying. And you're just feet away from reaching your destination, And you have to decide, do I let Robert Perry have this moment, or do I take this moment as a Black man, in the 19th century? Like, do I decide that this is going to be my triumph? And like, he thought back to a speech that he saw that Frederick Douglass gave when he was about 10 years old. He saw Frederick Douglass give a speech in Washington, D.C., and it was about Black people showing their excellence. And it was about sorry, I got a lot of plants, so I have gnats sometimes. So just, if I look a little crazy, don't just ignore that. But where was I? There was a moment with Robert Perry. So Robert Perry he's gotten frostbite and he has no toes. And he sent Matthew Perry and a team ahead of him so that they could go ahead and kind of lay a path, so that it would be easier for him, because he's kind of, I won't say disabled, but he's not in a position to be able to carry himself. And so there has to be a way made. And so they go out several miles in advance, and the team is right behind them. But Matthew has to make that decision, like, do I take this? And it created a lot of controversy. Matthew Henson was not given his accolades for more than 20 years after he reached the North Pole. Matthew Perry, Robert Perry, that's so funny, Matthew Perry. Robert Perry, no, friends did not go to the North Pole, but Robert Perry took all the accolades and took all the credit, even though Matthew Henson was the person who made all the sleds. He learned the Inuit language, native language, so that he could be able to communicate better with his team. He learned how to do everything that was necessary to make the trip successful, but he wasn't given any credit. And so you kind of think, if there's a moment where he thought to himself, will they even believe that I was the first person here? Like, who will champion for me? But at some rate, we all have to decide we're going to do things for ourselves, and that it has to not be about what other people will say or think, and what they will believe. It has to be within ourselves. We have to decide that we believe it ourselves. And so he made the decision to plant the flag himself and claim that rightful seat in history. And it, like I said, it wasn't until I want to say I don't want to get my dates mixed up. It was like 1950 something when he was finally honored by the United States and given his credit. I'm gonna move on to Benjamin Banneker, because I got some video I want to show you guys, and I'm really not sure how long I've been talking. And so I want to go ahead and move along. Benjamin Banneker, obviously, he's like the guy who does it all. We all know about Benjamin Banneker. If you're from Washington, D.C. area, you've heard of the Banneker Park over near the wharf. You've heard of the Banneker High School, the academic school that's got a new building now. And you've heard about how he surveyed the city. And we've heard a lot of things, but this guy has a lot of mythology attached to him as well. Because he was considered the first to do a lot of things, there's some embellishment that happens with him. And so I tend to think that he's more than daring. He's mythical. And so on top of all the real things he did, all the things that people make up are pretty exciting as well. Here we see part of his almanac, and then we see the map that was used for the layout of the city. Some people believe that he created the entire layout. That's not true. L'Enfant did, his plans were still partially used. However, with Andrew Ellicott, who he was brought on to help survey the city with, they decided to change the plans up a little bit at the end. So he can't be given full credit for the full layout of the city. And he can't be given the credit. Some people have said, I've read research that said he built this city brick by brick with his own hands. Come on, like we know this individual could not possibly done that by himself. But he was a genius. He was an astronomer who had a background in agriculture. And he was a student of science. And so he was brought on to the project to do astronomical calculations with a special clock, an astronomical clock that would help lay out the city based on stars. And so many people don't really know that this city is celestial. And so this is a heavenly seat of government. And so they asked this young son of the African continent, because Banneker's family heritage or lineage goes back to the Dogon of Mali. And the Dogon of Mali are very steeped in astrology and astronomy, and just having a full cultural history attached to that. And so that's already embedded in him and through his family. And just so that we, have a little bit of background, this young man was, I won't say young man, by the time he did the Almanac, he was an old man. But when we want to go back to when he was a young man in his early beginnings, he was educated in a Quaker school. His family was freedmen, a family of freedmen. His mother was what would be considered a mulatto. She was mixed race, but she was born of free parentage. One of her mother would have been a indentured servant brought over from Great Britain, and the father would have been, was a he was actually a king in the country that he came from in Dahomey. So they migrated, his people migrated from Mali. They end up in Dahomey. The town or the city where they were living at the time had engaged in chattel slavery, and he was captured and sent to the Americas. But he did not lose, obviously, any of his intellect, and it was passed on through to his children. And so at that time, when Benjamin Banneker was a young man, 1 in 5 individuals that looked like him was an enslaved person. 1 in 5 Black people were enslaved. And obviously under the lots of rules with regards to education and reading and writing, and that being against the law for you to engage in lots of ways. And so he didn't ever find himself around Black people. And he spent most of his time to himself. He spent most of his time observing nature. He wanted to really just exercise his intellect as much as possible to do what people considered. Can you guys see that? Is that in the way? Can y'all see that better?
It's a little in the way, but that's okay. Yep, that's there you go.
Okay. I'm unaware of what can and can't be seen here.
And
All
just
right.
Kelli,
Yes.
I don't want to cut you off, but just a little time check. We're at 9:51. So if you wanted to show us that video soon, that'd be great. So maybe we could get a couple questions in too.
Oh, yeah. So anyway, so he was a daring Dogon, and he did a bunch of daring things. The most daring thing he did was he wrote the first publicly documented protest letter to Thomas Jefferson, who was then Secretary of State, with regard to the fact that he was still owning slaves, but he had penned the Declaration of Independence. Obviously, we know that begins with, one of the famous lines, all men are created equal. And so he kind of charged him, and that was the most daring thing he'd ever done. He had the audacity to not just call this guy out who's, sitting at the seat of government here and will later on become president. He didn't just call him out, but then he decided he was going to publish the letter in his almanac, which of course, he put his face on. And I mean, just think about the 17th century brother, puts his face on literature. It's like illegal for people to read in places. And he puts his face on literature, and then he creates his almanac that allows for people to see his intellect. And he is determined for people to see him, and he dares people to ignore his intelligence. And so that's with him. I'm gonna go to the next slide now. And obviously, this is my little timeline of how I engaged with Toy Story. And first I introduced to them. I let them sit on my bookshelf for 10 years because I don't play with toys until now. I didn't think that it was anything that was, it's immature. I'm an adult, like, well, why am I playing with toys? Like, they were collector's items. They're supposed to stay in the box. But then I decided to take them out of the box because I got tired of dusting the boxes because they were sitting on my shelf, not being used. So eventually I take them out of the box. I take them out of the box at a time where I'm kind of feeling desperate and I'm in need of some joy. And they give me an outlet. And so A Black Toy Story is born. Now I'm here with you guys and we're celebrating A Black Toy Story on Creative Mornings, DC. Yay! I've had them featured in a lot of different ways. We had some outcomes. We had a gallery exhibition. I was invited to present in a Juneteenth Film Festival. I was also invited to present as a featured artist for the Ashe Exchange. Shout out to Sahat Walker and all the ways that she has supported me and the growing of this project. And it really just gave me an opportunity to see myself as an artist in a different way. And so I'm gonna skip to the next and the last part. We're gonna watch this video and then you guys can ask me some questions. Oh, wait a minute, maybe I should read that. It's not supposed to be so, don't worry. Don't worry.
Let's go. Yo, I'm like an addict, do I gotta have it. I ain't even playing, got a really bad habit. If it moves, gotta grab it, fuse like a magnet. Lose, won't have it till I'm doomed in a casket. I ain't playing, got a weird mind. If you work 8 hours, I'ma work 9. If the shit tastes sour, you should taste